Hi everyone, this is Noah Sandler from MTGO Academy, and today I'm going to be bringing you my top 15 bombs of Eldritch Moon. So before I get started, I wanted to point out that this order is going to be based on when you want to be taking these cards in draft. And there are some of these bombs being multicolored, there's even a triple colored card, and that means that it's less likely you're going to end up playing them, or it takes more effort to be able to splash them. So I did give precedence to the monocolor cards. They're going to show up a little more highly on this list, even though they might not be quite as powerful. So we're going to get started with number 15, Collective Effort. 1 and 2 white, sorcery with Escalate, tap an untapped creature you control. Choose one or more, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater, destroy target enchantment, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls. So two of these abilities stand out to me. The destroy target creature with power 4 or greater is, for 3 mana at sorcery speed, that's fine. It's maybe slightly overcosted, but since you're going to be killing a creature with power 4 or greater, you're actually still going to be up mana on the deal. Your opponent maybe emerged the creature out, had to spend a good amount of mana, so you're happy with that. And putting +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls, that's also very nice. If you're going wide, if you could sometimes maybe put 4 +1/+1 counters on your creatures, that can be really powerful. But even just putting 1 or 2 counters is going to be a really nice added effect to this. And the escalate cost is just tap an untapped creature you control. So it's kind of like Convoke. So you can see this as basically costing like 5 mana Convoke if you wanted to use all these abilities. The third one being destroy target enchantment, which can certainly come up. There's a couple decent enchantments in the format, but that's definitely the weakest one. But when it does come up, you have the potential to basically get a 3-for-1 off this card, only actually spending 3 mana. Because destroy target enchantment's going to 1-for-1, destroy the creature 1-for-1, and I feel like adding +1/+1 counters to all creatures you control is worth about a card. So there is a lot of value potential with this card, and I feel like just using it to 1-for-1 with something is good. There are a lot of important creatures to kill, the werewolves, the emerged creatures, and doing so while making the rest of your team bigger, I think is going to be a really huge blowout. Number 14, Bruna the Fading Light. 5 and 2 white, 5/7 legendary angel. When you cast Bruna, you may turn target angel or human card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's got flying and vigilance, and it also melds with Gisela. I don't really think that's coming up, so we can just ignore that as far as evaluating the card. So 5/7 flying vigilance is really good. It is going to block and kill basically anything. It's going to be able to attack through basically anything as well, and it's really hard to kill. Your opponent's going to need very specific types of removal to actually kill Bruna. And if they don't, you're attacking for 5 damage every turn, and you're potentially just halting their whole offense while you're doing it. So once this card is out, the game becomes, can your opponent remove it, or are they going to die? Maybe they can go super wide, but this is basically going to be the ideal finisher that plays both offense and defense and ends the game quickly. The only downside to the card is that it costs 7 mana. I even forgot to mention, it returns an angel or human from your graveyard to the battlefield. There are a few angels in the set, but there's a lot of humans, so there's actually a good chance that you're going to return something, and that adds extra value as well, but it's just not that important. It's really about being the 5/7 flying vigilance. But again, the main downside of the card is that it costs 7 mana, so if you're a really aggressive white deck, I think you're not going to want this card. You just don't want your curve to hit 7. Maybe you're just playing 16 lands in a red-white deck, but other than the very, very aggressive white decks, I think it's worth stretching your mana, playing maybe 17 lands, just to get this card in. It really is that powerful. At number 13, Spell Queller. 1 a white and a blue for 2/3 flash flying spirit. When it enters the battlefield, exile target spell with converted mana cost 4 or less. When it leaves the battlefield, the exile card's owner may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So to start with, a 2/3 flying flash, you'd actually be happy paying 4 mana for. So we're already taking a full mana off the cost, and already quantity, that card is great. It also has this weird ability. You get to exile a spell with converted mana cost 4 or less when you play it, and then when it leaves the battlefield, your opponent gets to cast that spell. So, assuming that your opponent can remove Queller relatively easily, you're still delaying their spell by a little bit. So, if you counter a creature, it let you attack, and your opponent couldn't block for turn, and then they get to play it, but still has summoning sickness. So, even then, that was nice value to add on top to your 2/3 flyer. And I mean, there's not a ton of spells that kill Queller, that early in the game. It's a flying attacker, so it's just going to be flying in the air. It doesn't have to get into too much combat. So I think a lot of times it's actually just going to steal the spell until the game's over. And if your opponent, like if you use Queller on a pump spell, potentially on removal spells or auras, depending on the card that they're playing, certain cards are really powerful the turn you play them and might fizzle or be less powerful on other turns. So sometimes your opponent can remove the Queller, but the time window for when their card was going to be good has ended, and now you sort of countered the card anyway. So the last thing is if you have something like Spectral Shepherd, or a way to flicker spell Queller, remember that if it leaves play before it exiles a spell, so you have that on the stack and you remove Queller from play, then the leaves the battlefield effect will go on the stack, resolve, and then you're going to exile the card, and then the card will never come back. So this is actually a pretty sick combo with Spectral Shepherd, that you can play Queller, target your opponent's spell, return Queller to your hand, the spell gets exiled permanently, and then you have Spell Queller back to repeat the process on a future turn. So, cool combo, worth noting, but just a very solid and very potentially powerful spell. It's blue-white, it's gold, that's why it's not a little higher on this list, but still really, really good card. Number 12 is Liliana the Last Hope. 1 and 2 black, it's a planeswalker with 3 loyalty. You can +1 it to give up to 1 target creature -2/-1 until your next turn. -2, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, then you can return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And -7, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of your end step, put X 2/2 black zombie tokens on the battlefield, where X is 2 plus a number of zombies you control. So for the emblem, if you have no zombies in play, you get 2 the first time, and then you get 4 additional ones, so you go up to 6, then you go up to 14, and so on. So it's cumulatively bigger as turns go by, and that's definitely going to kill your opponent. If they don't beat you down with flying creatures really quickly, they're going to die to that emblem. So, but for most planeswalkers, you got to look at the +1 and minus abilities. That's where you're going to tell how good they are. Worth noting that Liliana is a 3-mana planeswalker, so this can come down a lot earlier. If you're on the play, your opponent might not even have a creature in play when you play it, and you can already start buffing its loyalty. So looking at its first ability, giving -2/-1 until your next turn. That means that effect is going to stay on your opponent's turn. So this can, obviously you can just kill a 1 toughness creature, which you'd be very happy about. Then you're getting kind of a 2-for-1 just casting Liliana. But it can also take a larger creature or a flyer and neutralize it for a turn, make it easier for you to block them, and helping you protect Liliana. And the -2, gives you a card out of your graveyard. So, if this is late game and your opponent has a bunch of flyers and Liliana is going to die anyway, at least you can just cast it, get a card out of it, and force your opponent to kill it. And then I think really what Liliana does is sit there and just plus its loyalty. I think it's one of those types of planeswalkers. It doesn't have a huge impact on the board by itself. It's more just having the threat of Liliana getting close to ultimate is going to force your opponent to expend resources to try to kill it. And giving your opponent's creature -2/-1, that helps protect Liliana pretty well. So if you just get a couple decent blockers out and have Liliana, stopping your opponent's flyer, I think you can get up to 7 pretty reasonably, and then go for the ultimate. So even though it's not as immediately powerful as some other planeswalkers are, because it just costs 3 mana and it does a decent job of protecting itself, it's actually still a really, really powerful card. At number 11, Nahiri's Wrath. 2 and a red sorcery. As an additional cost to cast it, discard X cards. Deals damage equal to the total converted mana cost of the discarded cards to each of up to X target creatures and or planeswalkers. Now, this card is the card I think that I possibly overrated more than any other card on this list. So perhaps I have it higher here, and it ends up just being decent. But this is the kind of card that I love for a few reasons. So let's just break down the card a little bit, the mechanics of it. So you're going to play this card and discard at least one other card to kill one creature. And you have to discard cards with casting costs to actually get damage out of this card. So you can't just discard a land. And then, the higher casting costs of the card, I suppose, the more powerful it is that you're discarding. And then if you discard multiple cards, you're going to add the sum of those converted mana costs. So a 3 and a 4 means that you're dealing 7 to 2 creatures. You can also discard lands on top of that to target more creatures. So if you discard 2 lands and a 5, you deal 5 damage to 3 creatures. And you also played the Wrath, so you invested 4 cards to kill 3 creatures. You're going to invest 3 cards to kill 2 creatures. And so you're always going to be down 1 card on the exchange. Now, it is possible to use this with Madness. It is a red card. It only costs 3 mana, so it's not unreasonable that you could have 5 mana out and Madness something off of this. So that's nice, but that's not that important to the card being good. So, why would you play this card when it's always going to give you card disadvantage? It maybe requires you to, structure your turns in a really weird way. Like, you're not going to play your 5-drop, you're just going to hold on to it to try to make Wrath better. Why is this type of card good? For one, it's an incredible, insurance mechanism that no matter what your opponent does, you're going to be able to reset their board just about all the time. I mean, the card is dependent on the other cards that you actually have in your hand, but you can just keep lands in your hand and just wait around, maybe trade your creatures off, just chump a little bit, and as soon as you draw like a 5-drop, or if you draw your second 3-drop, all of a sudden you deal 6 damage to 4 of your opponent's creatures, and you basically plague win them. And that is such a huge effect. I mean, if this was just like a Wrath of God where you had to discard a couple cards to just kill all creatures in play, then that would still be a card that I would like. Just, your opponent, gets lucky and has, a big board presence, and this lets you reset the board. But this actually just lets you kill all your opponent's creatures and leave all of yours, alive. So, not only is this just good in control decks that want to, deal with a big board, but also in aggressive decks. So you have a couple creatures out, and you're in this aggressive deck, you've gotten your opponent down to 10 life, but then they play a couple big creatures, and suddenly you can't attack anymore. You can just sit back with Nahiri's Wrath, hold lands in hand, and if you haven't drawn Wrath, then you still might just want to hold lands in hand. And the second that you get Wrath, a couple lands, and a 5-drop, boom, you kill all your opponent's creatures, and then you just get to attack with all of yours. And now what does your opponent do? I mean, they're probably out of gas at that point. So this card is so powerful. It does require you to play well. You have to plan out what you want to do with this card. You have to anticipate what your opponent has in their hand. You want to get them to get all their cards into play, and then you want to destroy them all. But this is like a 3-mana Plague Wind. It's good when you're behind. It's good when you're ahead. It's good in just most situations. So I just think this card is extremely powerful. So I just had to have it on my list here. I've heard some people say they don't think it's quite as good, but I'm going to go with my gut on this one and put Nahiri's Wrath on this list. At number 10, we've got Tamiyo, Field Researcher. 1, a green, a white, and a blue for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. The +1 is choose up to 2 target creatures till your next turn. Whenever either of those creatures deals combat damage, you draw a card. -2, tap up to 2 target non-land permanents. They don't untap during the controller's next untap step. And -7, draw 3 cards, you get an emblem with you may cast non-land cards from your hand without paying their mana costs. So, worth noting that the ultimate is actually not that great. I think you could end up using it, but I feel like it's something that you're probably just going to be using the +1s, the +1 and the -2. I think they're just more powerful abilities. Drawing 3 cards, it is nice, but that doesn't really win you the game. And then casting your spells for free. By the time you ultimate this, you probably have enough mana to cast your spells anyway. So, I mean, that gives you like a little bit of tempo for a turn or so, but I just don't think that that's, like, it sounds very exciting, but by the time you actually activate it, it's not as exciting as it might appear as if you could do it early in the game. So let's look at the first 2 abilities. +1, choose up to 2 target creatures. Till your next turn, you get to draw a card whenever either of those creatures deals combat damage. So I'm just going to work like a Coastal Piracy. So if you just have 2 creatures attacking, this lets you draw 2 cards. And then it gets Tamiyo up to 5. And then, having drawn extra cards, that allows you to play defense better, protect Tamiyo pretty well. So that's really nice. I mean, you paid 4 mana for Divination that also gave you a 5 loyalty Planeswalker. That's an incredible deal. And you can also use it on your opponent's creatures, or maybe your flyer and their biggest creature. And that makes it harder for your opponent to justify attacking with their creature. Yet they really need to, because they've got to stop Tamiyo. So you're probably going to be drawing 2 cards every turn when you use this ability. And going up to 5 loyalty, the ability doesn't protect Tamiyo itself, but going up to 5 loyalty means that Tamiyo isn't going to die easily. So on to the next ability, tap up to 2 target non-land permanents. They don't untap during the controller's next untap step. For -2, that ability is really powerful, and especially because Tamiyo starts with 4 loyalty. So you can cast Tamiyo, tap your opponent's 2 best blockers, attack with your team. Their creatures don't untap, so they can't tech Tamiyo back. On your turn, you can tap down the next creature they played plus one of the original ones, attack with everything again, and then they untap 1 creature, and it just seems like you're winning that game. And if you're ahead and you play Tamiyo and tap down their creatures, the game's just over. And if you're behind, you can actually race pretty well, just tapping down the 2 biggest creatures, and I think you can still maybe swing those games. So Tamiyo is really good when you're ahead. It's completely insane when you're ahead, and it's still really good when you're behind. Even just playing it, tapping down 2 creatures, if you have no other creatures out, that could protect Tamiyo, buy a little bit of time to start playing some creatures and turn the board into your favor. So Tamiyo is really powerful. I don't think you're ever going to be using the -7 because the -2 is just so powerful. The problem with Tamiyo is that it is a 3 mana card, and if you're going to take it first pick in the draft, the chance that you're going to naturally be those 3 colors going with the flow of the draft is unlikely. So you're going to have to force it a little bit to try to make it work. But if you get past the murder pack 2 and there's just some mediocre cards in those colors, just take the murder. Don't lock yourself in so hard. But the good news is that one of the 3 colors is green, and that's going to open you up to having more fixing available. So it's so powerful, like even if you're just blue-white, you're still going to work to make the fixing happen, because this card is so good. There's not a lot of fixing, but this is so powerful that it's worth trying to make happen. So it's still going to be one of the top bombs in the format, even though it is a little iffy as a first pick, but I'm still taking it first pick. Number 9, Ishkana the Graph Widow. 4 and a green, a 3/5 legendary creature spider with reach. It has Delirium. When it enters the battlefield, put 3 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach onto the battlefield. And you can pay 6 and a black. Target opponent loses 1 life for each spider you control. So we need to look at this a couple ways. One is if you're just a green deck and you're not using Delirium, how good is this card? 3/5 reach for 5 is decent. It's not that much better than the 23rd card. The Watcher, the 2/5 reach that could block many creatures. That card was kind of like a 23rd card in just shadows. So this card is not great if you're not going to Delirium. But if you do Delirium, this is giving you 6 power and 11 toughness for just 5 mana, and all of it has reach as well, and that's insane. Like, nothing gives you that value. That is just so much being put into play, and not only that, I mean, it's sort of like having a 3/6 creature and a 3/5 creature, and both of them have reach for 5 mana. It's completely insane, but it could be even better than that, because I mean, the main reason that you might lose with Ishkana out is your opponent has like a really, really large creature in play that Ishkana can't stop. But Ishkana blocks pretty much anything else, and then if your opponent attacks with a really big creature, then you can just chump with the spiders one by one. And so that's like the really bad scenario, like the worst case scenario, and like it still works pretty well against that situation. And under any other circumstance where Ishkana is one of the large creatures in play, you're just never losing. Having just all these 1/2 creatures with reach, if you've ever played spider spawning, makes it really hard for your opponent to make good attacks into you. And adding that on top to a 3/5 reach, which is a great blocker to begin with. And then if you're playing black, you can just sit back and win using its activation cost, making your opponent lose up to 4 life every turn. And yeah, I mean, I don't really see what your opponent can do. Even if they kill Ishkana, you still have the 3/1/2 reach spiders, and that's going to make things really hard for your opponent. Plus, if they kill it and you reanimate it, play it again, get more spiders, that's really insane. So this is a card that is almost like a gold card, because you do have to be Delirium focused, or at least have the chance of getting to Delirium, even if you don't have a ton of Delirium enablers. If you think late game you have a reasonable chance of getting it, you'd still play the card. But just how good it is, it's just so hard to lose if you get to play this with Delirium, and so that makes it a pretty insane bomb. At number 8, we have Thalia, Heretic Cathar. 2 and a white for a 3/2 legendary human with first strike, and creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So 3/2 first strike for 3 is really good. It is going to be a great attacker, it's going to be a great blocker. It basically wins the early game. It's going to beat any other early game creature. So without any added text, it's already going to be a very high pick for both aggro decks and control decks. And its ability, the non-basic land part, there's not too many non-basic lands, so that's not going to come up too often. But having your opponent's creatures enter the battlefield tapped, it does counter haste creatures, there aren't too many of those. But what it really does is it's amazing for aggressive decks. It means that when your opponent plays a creature to block, they've got to wait a whole extra turn to start blocking with that creature. And then the turn after, their next creature they play to block, they have to wait another turn to be able to block with it. So if you have an aggressive start, it makes it really hard for your opponent to recover, because their creatures are just way too slow to stop your attackers, and you just keep going wide. And then if you have removal on top of that, so they play a creature, they have to wait an extra turn to block with it, and then you remove their creature, it's just game over. Now it does have 2 toughness, so it does get killed by a decent number of things in the format, but you only spent 3 mana on it. And I mean, it'll require your opponent to basically just spend their next turn, like their turn 3 or 4, spending a removal spell on it instead of playing another creature. So it's just really, really powerful in aggressive decks, but also very good in any white deck, and is just a monocolored card. So even though it's not like a bomb in the late game like some of the other cards on this list, it's just so efficient and easy to cast that it deserves this high spot on the list. At number 7, we have Nibelus of Frost, 2 and 2 blue, 3/3 flying Prowess Spirit, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, tap target creature an opponent controls, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So already we've got a 3/4 or a 3/3 flying for 4, and that would be a pretty high pick and limited to begin with. But it also has prowess, so it can race a little bit better, and does a little better in combat. But its ability is really, really good. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, tap a creature opponent controls, and it stays tapped for a turn. So I mean, you can just play a spell on your turn and remove a blocker, but it's best if you wait to your opponent's turn on there being a combat step, play an instant, tap their creature down, and then that creature is going to be tapped on their turn, so it stops an attack, stops their next block. It's going to stay tapped through the next untap step. It's going to stop an attack and then stop a block. So you're halting a creature for 2 full turns if you wait to your opponent's turn and have instants, and that's really insane because normally you play just a large flying creature. That's great, but this is a large flying creature that also stops your opponent's best creature as well. So that makes it closer to like a control magic effect. Like you're stopping their best creature and you're getting a great creature, and it's just monocolored. So yeah, it's just going to be a super high pick, even with just a few instants of sorceries in your deck. At number 6, Ulrich of the Krallen Horde. It's a 4/4 for 3, a red and a green, legendary creature, human werewolf. When it enters the battlefield or transforms into this side, target creature gets +4/+4 until on a turn, and has the werewolf ability. At the end of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, you transform it into Ulrich, the Uncontested Alpha. It's a 6/6 legendary creature werewolf. When it transforms into this side, you may have it fight target non-werewolf creature you don't control. And at the beginning of each upkeep, if a player casts 2 or more spells last turn, you flip it back into the 4/4 version that pumps something. And worth noting, flipping back to that 4/4 means you can make itself an 8/8 and attack with it on that turn. So just the front side, we have a 4/4 for 5. That is not a great rate, but it's passable. And then it gives a creature +4/+4 until a turn when you play it. So it turns your 2/2 into a 6/6. So your opponent's taking 6 damage, or it is forcing a chump out of your opponent. And I think it's going to get chumps a lot of the time. So that makes this like a 4/4 for 5 that kills a small creature, and that's pretty nice value. But what really makes it great is its flip side. I mean, it's not that hard to flip it, just don't play a spell for a turn. And then it becomes a 6/6 and fights your opponent's best non-werewolf creature. So it's basically killing anything. There's a couple of merged creatures that are larger, but that's killing pretty much your opponent's best creature and then giving you a 6/6. Now you're probably not going to attack with the 6/6 that turn since it's going to have damage on it, but the turn after you've got a 6/6. You only spend 5 mana for this, so you're killing maybe 2 creatures, like a small creature when you play it, they have to chump, and then you kill your opponent's biggest creature, and you get a 6/6, and then if it flips over again, you get the +4/+4 again, flip back, you get to fight again. So really insane card, super powerful. It is a gold card, so that means it's not quite as great of a first pick as it might be otherwise, but because it's green, it means that it's pretty easy to splash compared to if this was like a black-blue gold card, so it's still going to be a really, really high pick in draft. Okay, we're down to the top 5, and that's when things start to get really busted. At number 5 is Mirrorwing Dragon. 3 and 2 red for 4/5 flying dragon. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Mirrorwing Dragon, that player copies that spell for each other creature he or she controls that spell could target, and each copy targets a different one of those creatures. So for starters, 4/5 flying for 5 is really, really good. It dodges a lot of the removal in the format, and is a great blocker, a great attacker. You're just going to win a lot of games by playing this and attacking with it a bunch. So that's great. And its ability is also typically going to be a very good ability. So whenever you play a spell targeting only the dragon, you get to copy it for each one of your creatures. So if you have pump spells like Uncaged Fury, then it's going to target your whole team, and you're probably winning the game that turn. And then it has like the flip side of that for your opponent. So if they target the dragon, then they're targeting all their creatures with that effect. So that means 2 things. One of them really good, one of them pretty bad. So the good thing for you is that if they play a removal spell like Murder on Mirrorwing Dragon, it's going to target murder on all of their creatures. So they're going to kill your dragon, but they're also going to kill all of their creatures. So that protects Mirrorwing Dragon from a lot of removal spells that could otherwise target it, because it's just going to kill your opponent's team. So they're never going to do that. But the downside is that your opponent can also use pump spells targeting your dragon, and they can pump their whole team with that. So if they have an Uncaged Fury, that gives them an out to beating your dragon if they can go wide. So you have to be a little careful if you're just attacking in with your dragon every turn and your opponent has a bunch of creatures out. This might end up being a big downside. Like, the dragon doesn't need a ton of upside for you to play it, so the fact that it does have this potential for you to just lose because of its effect does downgrade the card a little bit. But I mean, generally, your opponent's more likely to just have removal than single target pump spells. Even if they have those single target pump spells, like you still might beat them. So it's going to be pretty rare that you actually lose to that effect. But it is worth noting that that is a possibility, and it's something that you do have to play around. At number 4, Dosent of Perfection. 3 and 2 blue, 5/4 flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 blue human wizard token on the battlefield. If you control 3 or more wizards, you transform it into Final Iteration. 6/5 flying, Eldrazi insect. Wizards you control have +2/+1 and have flying, and it retains the whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 blue human wizard onto the battlefield. A lot of text. So its front side, 5/4 flying for 5, is already amazing. It's a 4-turn clock. 4 toughness does die to some removal spells like Throttle and Alchemist's Greeting, but it's still going to survive a lot of things, and it's going to beat any other flying creature or reach creature in combat. So already it's going to be a great card, and its ability is actually really nice. So when you have a very large flying creature, what you want at that point is just to have blockers on the ground. So you can just attack in the air, and then you can just chump on the ground. And Dosent provides that for you. I mean, normally you have to build your deck, so you've got some walls or small creatures you can hold the fort. But Dosent does that all by itself. You just need to have instant or sorcery spells, so you're attacking for 5 every turn, and then you have a decent supply of chump blockers when you're playing your spells. So that's an amazing combination and really improves the card. And then if you've got 3 or more wizards, you transform it, so it becomes a 6/5 flying instead, gets a little bigger, dodges a little more removal, and then it gives your wizards +2/+1 flying, so you've got these 3/2 flying wizards. So yeah, I mean that's definitely more powerful, though it's unlikely that you're going to need that to happen for this card to win the game for you. Probably just trading your wizards off, turn after turn to prevent damage to yourself. I think that's going to be good enough. But if for some reason you've got a ton of spells, you can get a bunch of wizards in play, or maybe you already have a couple, wizard cards that happen to be in play already. Just adds a little more upside to this card that's already pretty insane. Now moving on to the number 3 card, we've got another decent jump. This card's really powerful. It's Gisela the Broken Blade. 2 and 2 white, a 4/3 legendary creature angel with flying, first strike, lifelink. And it also melds with Bruna, but again, that's just not happening in limited, so we can ignore that part of it. So what it is a 4/3 flying, first strike, lifelink for 4 mana. Going over the Asst of Frost, I talked about how a 3/3 flyer for 4 is already a very good card, and this has an extra point of power. It has first strike and lifelink on top of that. So, and these abilities all work super well together. 4/3 first strike with flying is beating any other flying creature other than like Ishkana, the 3/5 reach. So this is just attacking through everything. And it has lifelink as well, so you're just draining your opponent for 4 every single turn. So if this is in play, like I'm not seeing how you're losing. So the only downside is that it has 3 toughness. So it does die to a decent number of removal spells. So if your opponent has that, okay, you 1-for-1. Fair enough. If they don't have that, they lose. So this card is going to cause a lot of really dumb games where, I don't know, you had some cool plan, you're trying to get work, your opponent plays Gisela, and nothing that you're doing is going to compare. You're going to try to build up your board, but they just get to such a high life total and deal you so much damage that it just kills you. So, like, super overpowered card. It's just held back a little bit from being in the top 2 cards in this set by its 3 toughness that it's something that you can reasonably deal with. Like, you'll have a couple answers in your deck. And now, the top 2 biggest bombs of Eldritch Moon. I feel like even though Gisela is insane, I think these cards are even a tier above. Both of these cards are absolutely insane. For a long while, I actually had the order switched. Both cards are just so good that it's hard to decide between them. I decided to go for raw power in this case, so that's going to leave number 2 as Distended Mindbender. It's 8 mana for a 5/5 Eldrazi insect, emerge for 5 and 2 black, and when you cast it, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose from it a non-land card with converted mana cost 3 or less, and a card with converted mana cost 4 or greater. That player discards those cards. So, oh my god, this card is insane. I suppose it takes a little bit of setup. You need to have a creature in play by turn 4. If you play it, you want a 3-drop. So, you play a 3-drop, your opponent plays a 3-drop. Maybe they have a good hand, they feel pretty good about their chances of winning. Then on turn 4, you play a 5/5, and you take out, very likely, the best 2 cards in their hand. You get to guarantee you take out their best card, and then, because you get to choose any card in their hand. And then the second card is, somewhat more limited. It's got to be, either less or more, depending on what their best card was. And sometimes you'll miss with the second ability, but I feel like most of the time you're actually hitting twice. So you just maybe got rid of your opponent's best 2 cards in their hand. And you have a 5/5 out. So, how does your opponent beat you? I just don't know. Like, you played a 4-mana 5/5, way above the curve, and you got rid of your opponent's answers and any other, bomb that they have, and your opponent's in top deck mode. On turn 4, this card is like your opponent double mulligan to start the game, and then you played a 4-mana 5/5 on turn 4. Like, I don't see how you lose that game. Your opponent, maybe they top deck an answer to it, but it's just going to attack for 5 every turn, and you still have all the cards in your hand. You can still do stuff. So just the disruption that this card causes is so insane. I suppose it's limited a little bit by the fact that, you do have to have a creature in play to sacrifice to get it out early, but also that in the really late game, I suppose it is just a 5/5, and you might hit something, but you're not going to hit anything of great value if you do it late. And then if you don't have actually 8 mana out, you're still going to have to sacrifice a creature to play it. So in a top deck war, you're still happy to draw it. Like, you replace your worst creature with the 5/5, and you get to clear out whatever's left in your opponent's hand. But it's not quite as bomby as some of the other cards on this list in the really late game. But on turn 4, if you play this on turn 4 or on turn 5, I think you're just winning the game. It's so insane. But I guess not quite insane enough to get the number 1 spot. Very, very close battle between these 2 cards. But I had to go with just my gut, the gut punch that I got when I saw the number 1 card, because it is so powerful. And it is Decimator of the Provinces. It's 10 mana for a 7/7 with Emerge, 6 and 3 green. When you cast it, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample until the turn. It has trample and haste. So, worth noting, when you cast it, means that the Decimator is not going to get the +2/+2 until the turn when you play it, because it won't be in play when that ability resolves. But it's still 7/7 trample haste. So for starters, like, this is overrun, pretty close to it. Like, you only give +2/+2 in trample, but you get a 7/7 trample haste on top of it. So that's going to be better than the extra +1/+1. And you have to sacrifice a creature to get it out, but this just gives you so much damage back with the 7 haste trample that it's not really going to reduce your damage output on the turn that you play it. So just as an overrun effect, this is going to be just as good as Overrun was, which was 3 green and 2 to give all your creatures +3/+3 and trample until end of turn at sorcery speed. It was one of the best cards in any format that it was printed in. And this is an Overrun, but it also gives you a huge creature that is going to kill your opponent in 2 turns, most likely, and is really hard to deal with. 7 toughness. So, and it's haste. So like your opponent is probably just taking a giant hit the turn you play it. If you have 2 creatures in play, just like a 2/2 and a 3/3, you sacrifice the 2/2. You get a 7/7 and a 5/5 trample going at your opponent. Your opponent has to deal with 12 damage, and then the next turn you have another 7 potentially coming in from the Decimator. So, if you're in a board stall and you draw this, it's just game over. It's just way too much damage at your opponent's face, and you can play this as early as turn 5 reasonably. So you play a 4-drop. I mean, if you go 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, and then play Decimator turn 5, I think that's basically game over. You're just attacking for so much damage, then your opponent has to remove the Decimator, which is really hard to do. So, this card's really close with Distended Mindbender. I mean, Mindbender I think is a better early play, and Decimator is a better late game play. The one thing that maybe want to go for Decimator second is that it is triple green, so it does require a commitment to green. So you're going to want to run at least 8 forests, but probably 9. It is a late game card, so it's fine if you're a little bit short, because you have plenty of time to actually draw your sources. But yeah, the card is just really insane, and a lot of times you're just going to have a lot of creatures in play, and it's just going to end the game on the spot. So, card's super powerful, and I'm going to call it the #1 bomb in Eldritch Moon. So, that's going to do it for me with my Eldritch Moon review. I think the set is pretty exciting, a lot of crazy bombs, and I think it's going to add a lot to the Shadows format, which I also liked quite a bit. I would love to get your feedback on these reviews. They are a lot shorter than the other reviews that I've done, where I go just card by card with everything. Hopefully that this is just as informative for you and being a little easier to digest. But I'd like to hear what you think about these. Maybe I could make it even shorter. I'm open to trying different things with these reviews. So thank you so much for watching. I wish you the best of luck at your pre-releases and release events for this set, and I will see you next time.